The difficulty of talking about understanding Israel in troubled times is that you can prepare a lesson in a slide presentation, but there's a great likelihood that it will be obsolete by the time you give it, even if that's tomorrow. And that is the time that we live in. I think it was Pastor Zempel that said a few moments ago that it seems like more and more the focus is on what's going on in Israel. And as I read the scriptures, I believe that that will only accelerate going forward. I believe that in God's economy, Israel is at the center of everything. And we're going to see the whole world looking in that direction and that being the key to everything that's going on in the world. And so this is very apt. And so I hope that it'll be interesting. We're going to look today. So my primary ministry is trying to encourage people to take the gospel to the Jewish people. That's my day job. That's my passion. That's what I do. Today we're going to start out by talking about current events. This first hour, I'm going to try to, it's not going to be a Bible lesson. I'm more going to try to educate you about what's going on there. There is much being said that is inaccurate, and I find that many people are either uninformed or misinformed. And many people, sometimes experts, so-called, seem to have no actual clue to what's actually happening over there. And so what I'd like to do is during this first hour is take time to speak about what is happening there. And I don't know, can we do my slides there? There we go. So we're going to talk about war in the Middle East, and during this hour I want to talk about the geopolitical context of what is happening there. I want to start by saying that how you understand the world depends on what glasses you're wearing. Okay? Now I actually am not wearing glasses, I am wearing contact lenses, but you have to. Everybody sees the world through their own worldview, through their own specific lenses. And that lens determines the way you see the world and the way that you understand it. And it's really important that you are intentional about the perspective that you choose to look at the world through. I think that probably was grammatically incorrect. So for instance, there are many people who believe that the key issue in the world is money. That money is everything, and the economists will tell you that wealth is the issue. You should follow the money trail. And that's how you really understand what's happening. And by the way, many people believe that, and there is an element of truth in that. Communists, there aren't actually that many of, in China they still have communists, and on American universities. But the communists would say, Karl Marx taught us that everything is about class struggle. The proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the upper class and the lower class going at it, and it's all about class struggle. Politicians believe it's all about power. That power is the coin of the realm, that's the one thing that really matters. And so that's what they're struggling for. If you would like a master's class on that, you need to talk to a certain Vladimir Putin. Racial justice advocates see everything through a lens of race. It's all racial. It's all a racial issue. Anarchists say there's no meaning at all. Nothing makes a difference. I am honestly quite troubled that in the church in America today, almost, let's say this, a vast number of people see everything through a political lens. It's all about politics. And if we get the right politicians elected, then we could fix all the problems of our world. I'm choosing words carefully. And we believe that the politicians are the answer. I don't necessarily think that will ever fix the issues of the world. All of these issues that we're looking at, there's probably in every one of them some truth. And there's probably, I'm not saying that these are bad ways of looking at things, because there is some element of truth and understanding that you can find in each of those, but it's limited, because the perspective that is right is God's perspective. The perspective that is right is the spiritual perspective. What is God doing in the world? What is it that what is the spiritual reality behind what's happening? That's the true perspective. And as a Christian, that's the one that should be primary for us. And having said that, what I'm going to do this first hour is talk about the geopolitical aspects of it so that we understand the history, the geography, and the power plays that are going on, because I feel like you need to be informed and you need to know those things. Next hour, we'll talk more about what God is doing in the world and how all of this is happening according to God's plan. So when we talk about the Middle East today, many people don't understand that the key to almost everything that is happening in the Middle East today is Iran. Iran, the country of Iran right now is controlling and is driving very, very much of everything that's happening there. And you need to see them as central to to everything that's swirling around. Iran is, a lot of people, I spoke to somebody just the other day and they said, well, I think of Iran as like, I'm going to offend somebody, I'm sure. They're just a small, insignificant country like Vietnam is what they said to me. If you're Vietnamese, please accept my apologies. And people don't realize that Iran is actually a large and very powerful country. It's a country with almost 90 million people. It's the 17th largest population in the world, and it's got a GDP of $1.9 trillion per year, which is 19th in the world. So it's not Russia or China or America, but it is a very big, and in that region of the world, it is the strongest, most powerful country. It's an arid part. The Middle East is an arid area. It does not support huge populations, and Iran's population dwarfs the other countries there. It's got a large population with a high GDP and an educated populace that makes them a powerful country there. In 1979, the government of Iran, which was American-backed but really corrupt, was overthrown by radical Islamists. The guy was an Ayatollah named Ali Khomeini, who is different than the current guy. No, Ali is the new guy. Ruhollah Khomeini, and the current guy is Ali Khamenei. But anyway, so Iran's government was overthrown, and these radical Islamists took over the country, took control of it, and in doing so, some of us who have gray hair remember took many Americans hostage for 440 days, which was pretty dreadful. Now, Iran's goals. Iran sees itself as the rightful regional power in the Middle East. The thing about regional powers, they're like, what we want to do is we want to control our region. And then once they control their region, then they want to control all the other regions too. And so Iran believes that the right thing for it to do is to be in control of the Middle East. It believes that, and that's not talk. That's not just theory. They're working diligently night and day to achieve regional dominance in the Middle East for several reasons. To export their very radical 12er version of Shia Islam to the rest of the Middle East and to the rest of the world. As Baptists, this is probably going to be very understandable to us. There's a lot of different kind of Baptists, and we don't always talk to the other kinds. And in the Muslim world, we think of Islam is Islam, but the truth of the matter is there's many different groups inside of Islam. And the part of the version of Islam that the Iranian Ayatollahs believe in is a very extremist version. And even the other Muslims don't like it. And so they're like, all of these other Muslims need to believe like we do, and they don't believe in door-to-door evangelism. They believe in sword-to-sword evangelism. And so they're trying to, first of all, export their version of Shia. They're also, they want to dominate the Middle East. They want to take over and be in charge. And the problem for them in that, because there's no countries there that are more, the other Arab countries of the Middle East are not strong enough to stand up against them. Saudi Arabia is very rich, but has a tiny population, and Iran could roll right over them. And Iran knows that, and Saudi Arabia knows that. And all the other countries are in that situation. The only people there that can stand up against Iran are Israel, and America is not in the Middle East, but America is in the Middle East, Israel and America. And that's why very often when we're looking at that part of the world, we hear crowds of Iranians chanting, "Death to America, death to Israel." They call America the great Satan, Israel the little Satan. And they openly advocate the genocide of the Jewish people. If you have heard, if you've watched the news, you must have heard, the big chant that you're hearing all over the world today is, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." From the river, the Jordan River, to the sea, to the Mediterranean is the land of Israel. And what they mean is we will take control of all the land there. What that means is we are going to drive out or wipe out all of the Jews. River to the sea is genocide. It's wipe them all out. And so we see on our college campuses people going around holding up signs and chanting this chant, openly advocating the genocide of the Jewish people. You know, if Pastor got up on Sunday and said, there's some people group in the world that just needs to be wiped out, we should just kill them all, he would be probably imprisoned for that. That's just completely unacceptable. You're not allowed to do that unless you're Iran or a liberal who supports them. And so they are open. They're not being clever about it. They're not like hushing about it. They're being very open that they support the genocide of the Jewish people. So how are they going to go about accomplishing that? Well, with the weaker countries in the area, they're going to use diplomatic, economic, religious, and military power to dominate those weaker countries. They can do that. They are doing that, and they're having significant success in that. But they're not powerful enough to go head-to-head with the Israeli and especially with the U.S. military. And they know that. And so they have two strategies to fix that problem. The first strategy is to establish proxy terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East. And so what they do is they are the world's chief exporter of terror. They are a terrorist state, and they export terror everywhere they go. They go into all of these countries, and they stir people up, they arm them, they train them, they lead them to then carry out terrorism against the governments of those countries to destabilize those countries and eventually to take those countries over. Is it working? It's working very well. The other thing that they're doing is they still know that Israel is a close match with them, but America's not. And so they're very much concerned about finding a way to back us off. And so they're working hard to acquire nuclear weapons. Because the day they have a nuclear bomb, then they can look at us and say, look, leave us alone and let us do what we want in the Middle East. And if you don't, there's going to be a nuke over Washington. And they're building rockets to deliver those, and they're building bombs to do that. Now, the Iranian nuclear program has been going on for quite a long time. They're getting help from their good friends, Russia, North Korea. It's a lovely neighborhood, okay? Just such a sweet group of people. And so you have the Russians and the North Koreans assisting the Iranians in processing the uranium to get it to a high enough level of purity that they can make bombs with it. They are right now, where we're at today, they're at the threshold of building a nuclear bomb. I think they don't have one yet. I'm not sure that's true, but they will have one very soon, okay? With the help that they've gotten. By the way, I say they're getting help from Russia and North Korea, and that's very much the case. But don't want to go too much off onto this rabbit trail. The American government has behaved completely irresponsibly in their dealings with this. Essentially, under the Obama administration went and said, this is unacceptable for you to do all this stuff with this uranium and develop this bomb. We don't want you to do that, and we're prepared to take steps to stop you. And so after a series of negotiations, Iran agreed, okay, we will promise to publicly quit enriching uranium for 7 years. And after that, we can do what we want. And America signed off on that, which essentially is the same thing as saying, don't do it during my administration, but when I'm gone, you can do whatever you please. And that's the deal that was made. I get a little excited about that, but nonetheless, so they're working to develop these terrorist groups, and simultaneously they're working to develop the nuclear weapons, and they're this close, and the rockets to deliver them, they have them, okay? They are a threat, not just to Israel, but to the Middle East, not just to the Middle East, literally to the world. We're talking about a nuclear-armed terrorist regime. That is not a real good thing. So that's the situation that they're doing there. Now I mentioned that the terrorist group. This is a list of the terrorist organizations that are supported by Iran. Iran has established most of them. They fund them, arm them, train them, and direct them. And so the Iranian military is working through terrorist groups all over the world, okay? We see them in Bahrain, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in the Palestinian territories, in Syria, in Yemen. They have terrorist groups all throughout that part of the world. In many of these places, multiple terrorist groups. And these people do their bidding because they're the ones who are financing them and giving them the weapons and leading and guiding and training them. So as a result of this, Israel understands that Iran is an existential threat to the nation of Israel. And when I say existential threat, a threat to the existence of the state of Israel. And Israel has been saying to the whole world, hey, look what they're doing. World, we've got to stop them. They're a threat to all of us. We ought to do something. And the world is busy sitting on its hands saying, well, we couldn't do that. And Israel's like, it's going to be very challenging for us to go it alone to take on Iran. We need others to come, but nobody will come along. And so there's been this shadow war going on between Israel and Iran that's been going on for years. And it looks like this. Iran is playing chess here, and it's got this terrorist group attack Israel, that terrorist group attack Israel, and they're attacking both American interests and Israeli interests all through the Middle East. They have taken over the country of Yemen, and they essentially now... Bashar Assad still rules in Syria, but he does exactly what the Iranians tell him. They pretty much control the country of Lebanon. They largely control the country of Iraq. And so right now, Iran is, through these terrorist groups, taking over country after country in the Middle East. And they're accomplishing their goals that way. Israel is striking back through cyber warfare, sabotage of nuclear program, targeted assassinations of military and officers and nuclear scientists. Israel keeps hitting them back. They invented a computer virus and inserted it into the Iranian nuclear program. And they said, okay, close all these valves, now run all these pumps at high speed, and things, centrifuges began to blow up and things. And so they have done all sorts of things to torment and slow down and retard the development of the nuclear program. And many nuclear scientists, Russian nuclear scientists, Ukrainian nuclear scientists have mysteriously come to very sudden ends. And their lives have been cut off by nobody knows exactly who, but we have a strong suspicion who. And so this has been going on for many years. These two countries have been fighting this shadow war for years and years and years. Now, let me back off of Iran for a minute, and I want to talk to you about something that's very important to understand. It's called the Abraham Accords. And I'm going to start in 1967. Israel was founded in 1948. In 1967, the Arab countries attacked Israel a second time, Six-Day War. Israel was attacked from all sides with the goal of destroying it completely, and 6 days later, they not only had won the war, beaten these three armies, but also taken a lot of territory from them, and the Arabs were very discouraged by this, and so they got together in the city of Khartoum, and they made the Khartoum resolution. The Khartoum resolution is famous for the three no's. Everybody agreed, all the Arab countries agreed, there will be no peace, no recognition, and no negotiation with Israel. All of us vow that we will never make peace with them, we will never recognize them as a nation, and we will never negotiate with them. And so it's been a very difficult thing for Israel, as they've been in a very hostile neighborhood all of these years. In spite of that, with great difficulty, in 1979, Israel was able to achieve peace with Egypt. And that was really a historic thing. And then in 94 with Jordan. So with two of their neighbors, they were able to get peace. But the rest of them were sticking to the Khartoum resolution. No, no, no. Until just a couple years ago. In 2020, 2021, there was a fresh wind that swept through the Middle East, and suddenly countries began to make peace with Israel. Bahrain did, United Arab Emirates did, Morocco did, Sudan did, and there's a list of others who are either not officially doing it, but who are quietly cooperating with Israel, or people who are considering joining this. The crown prince of the Arab countries would be Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, everyone believes, is on the threshold of joining the Abraham Accords and making peace with Israel. Now, we have to stop and look at this and say, well, what in the world is going on? Suddenly, all the Arabs love the Jews. Isn't that lovely? Well, they don't. Okay? You say, well, what is going on? Well, what's going on is Iran. All of these Arab countries know they can't stand up to Iran. They're terrified of Iran. They understand that Iran is going to take them over unless they find some way to defend themselves, and they don't have the strength to defend themselves. And so finally, in desperation, they're holding their nose and making friends with the Jews, the lesser Satan, and America, the greater Satan, in the Iranian way of looking at it. And so these countries, it's not a great love for the Jewish people. What's happening here is that these countries have realized that their survival depends on allying with somebody who has genuine strength. That's Israel and the US. And so they're like, okay, look, either we're going to be destroyed and rolled over by Iran, or we're going to make peace with Israel. So Khartoum resolution went out the window, and now we are making peace with Israel. They formed what's called the MEAD, the Middle Eastern Air Defense Pact. It's kind of like a little NATO to a sense. And we saw that operate for the first time last week. And so that's what's going on with that. Now, I need to also give you a little bit of history about Israel and Hamas. Israel fought major wars with the Arabs in 1948, their war for independence, 1967, the Six-Day War, 1973, the Yom Kippur War. In all of these wars, they should, by all rights, have gotten slaughtered. In all of these wars, they won overwhelming victories, okay? The Arabs found that they could not go head-to-head and defeat Israel, as much as that discouraged them, and so they began to foment all these terrorist groups. And a bunch of terrorist groups arose, and two of the biggest of them were called Fatah and Hamas. And by the way, the terrorist groups got together. Some of us will remember there was a thing called the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was essentially an umbrella organization for all the different terrorist groups. But the bigs there were Fatah and Hamas. Okay, now in '93, under great pressure, America and the West were putting all kinds of pressure trying to bring about peace in the Middle East, and they were pressuring Israel to come to the table and negotiate with the terrorists, and pressuring the terrorists to swear off of terrorism. And so in 1993, finally, Fatah, led by a guy named Yasser Arafat, who was an old terrorist, they said, we are willing to, if you notice I put that kind of in quotation marks, we will renounce terror and recognize Israel. At least we'll say publicly that we will renounce terror and recognize Israel. It doesn't mean we'll actually do it, but we'll tone down and we'll work together with them. You say, why would they agree to that? Well, they would agree to that because Israel was also coming to the table and saying, okay, we will negotiate with these terrorists that have been slaughtering us. And here's what we will do. We will allow them to have not autonomy, but a degree of self-rule in the territories that are predominantly Arab inside the nation of Israel. Now, when this happens, Fatah chooses this more path of moderation. They're still enemies of Israel, but publicly they're going to denounce terror and recognize Israel. But Hamas said, absolutely not. No way. We are not going to denounce terror. We are not going to recognize Israel. We stand for genocide. We will destroy the Jews. We will kill them all. And so that Hamas held firm to that. Quick geography lesson. This is the land of Israel. Now you hear terms like the West Bank and Gaza Strip. What are these areas? If you look at this map, they're cross-hatched there. Those are areas that after the war for independence, they were in the area that you and I would suppose belongs to Israel, but they were occupied by others. The West Bank was occupied by the Jordanian army. They owned that piece of territory, and that piece of territory was inhabited primarily by Arabs, okay? You say, why is it called the West Bank? Is there a bank there? No, it's because most of Jordan is on the east, most of the country of Jordan is on the east bank of the Jordan River, and this big chunk of that was controlled by Jordan is on the west bank of the Jordan River, so we call that the West Bank. Okay, there's another place called the Gaza Strip. It's down there wedged in the southwest corner of Israel, right up against the sea. It doesn't have great significance. It's essentially a desert with a small town there that produces a little bit of citrus and nothing useful. Okay, but at the end of the war in 48, the Egyptians occupied that. So these two pieces of land, one was occupied by the Egyptians, the other by the Jordanians. And so they were different. They were mostly filled with Arab people, and they were occupied by these Arab armies. And so that's the geography there. Now, Israel's agreement with Fatah when they swore off of violence and it recognized Israel is they said, look, we, Israel, maintain that we have sovereignty over our entire land. We are not giving you sovereignty over this land. It's ours. We will defend it. It belongs to us. However, because there are primarily Arab people living in those places, we will allow you self-rule there. So we maintain autonomy and security, but we will allow you Palestinians, Fatah, now called the Palestinian Authority, to rule the day-to-day operations of that, to have the police force, to run the water department, to be the mayors, and so on. And so we will let you Arabs in the Palestinian Authority rule the Arab people in these areas under our authority. And so that was the agreement. The terrorists said, we will swear off terrorism and recognize Israel. And Israel said, then we will allow you to have a form of self-rule in your territory. And so that's what happened. And the Palestinian Authority, Fatah becomes the Palestinian Authority, rules the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And that's how things ran for some time until 2007. In 2007, Hamas terrorists attacked, not Israel, they attacked the Palestinian Authority figures in the Gaza Strip. When I say attacked, I'm not saying in a committee meeting. They shot them dead with machine guns, threw them off of tall buildings, and murdered them all. And Hamas then took over the Gaza Strip. Okay, I'm going back one. So that strip of land down there in the corner, the Gaza Strip, was taken over by the genocidal terrorist group Hamas. And so Israel suddenly, it's not a comfortable working relationship. Israel and Palestinian Authority, they work together, but they don't like each other, and they're constantly at odds, but they have a very difficult working relationship. But now Hamas has taken over Gaza, and Israel's like, no, no. They are terrorists. They are openly terrorists. They're trying to kill us. It's not just talk. They really are trying to kill us. This is not okay. We refuse to go with this. Okay? But Israel found itself in a terrible quandary. What are they going to do about it? Because these terrorists are embedded in the civilian infrastructure of the Gaza Strip. They are putting their headquarters in hospitals, in schools, in mosques. They're building tunnels under people's homes and through residential neighborhoods. They're setting up rocket launchers next to elementary schools and kindergartens. And so Israel's like, okay, so we have some terrible, terrible terrorists right next door. What we ought to do is we ought to go in there and take them out. But if we do, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be brutal. Our people will suffer horribly. We'll lose a lot of men doing that. And because they've built themselves all in with civilian, by the way, building yourselves in with a civilian infrastructure is a war crime. Okay? But because they've done that, there's no way we can go in and take them out without it creating vast destruction among the civilian populace. And we don't want to hurt the Palestinian people. we are annoyed with them and they are a problem to us, but we don't want to slaughter them. And so what do we do? We ought to clean them out, but if we do, it's going to be a disaster and the whole world's going to shout us down and say that we're horrible people. And so Israel for 17 years has been forbearing. For 17 years, they've been like, we should, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to see all those people die. That's not a good thing. And for 17 years, they've waited. And during those 17 years, Hamas launches missiles all the time, sends terrorists, and constantly is a grief to Israel. And all of the Israeli communities in that part of Israel, look, bombs happen on a regular basis. Okay, I don't know how many days of rain you have in Menominee Falls, but it's like, I'm joking, but it's like if you live in that part of Israel, they get up and they say, oh, good morning, it's going to be 95 degrees and a 30% chance of missiles today. Because their kids grow up living in bomb shelters. And they carry out their lives knowing that there's a group right there over that fence who is dedicated to destroying us all. And so there's this terrible thing. And for 17 years, Rhonda and I lived in Israel. And I remember incoming, sirens going off. We were up in Tel Aviv. And boom, here are the missiles exploding. They were shot down by the Israeli Iron Dome. And our whole building quivers and shakes. And, a few more missiles, a few more quivers and shakes. All clear, siren, go back to work. Rhonda and I experienced that. The people who live down there in that area experienced that all the time. And so there was this terrible way of life because of this misery. And that all went until 6 months ago. 6 months ago, October 7th, those people, it was a holiday weekend. It was a Saturday holiday weekend. And they were doing what most people in Wisconsin do. They were sleeping in because it was a holiday, little dusty farm towns down in southern Israel. And suddenly the sirens went off. And they're like, oh no, another air raid. It wasn't just another air raid. 5,000 rockets came raining down. Rockets falling like rain. And people are diving for cover into bomb shelters thinking, man, how many is there going to be this time? How long is this going to last? Hope everything will be okay. And what they didn't know is that the rockets were not the threat. The threat was that Hamas blew through the border fences and 3,000 heavily armed, absolutely lusting after blood terrorists came charging through the fences. And suddenly you had little towns of grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads and boys and girls with no warning, 150 heavily armed terrorists showed up in these villages. They weren't looking to accomplish military purposes. They were looking for mass slaughter. They didn't just kill people. They tortured people. They raped people. They disfigured people. They murdered people. They dismembered the bodies afterwards. I cannot tell you the things that they did. They are beyond horrible. It's like, so I don't ever watch horror films, but whatever you can imagine, it was way worse. It was horrible. 1,200 Israelis died. 1,200 plus Israelis died. That's a picture just like a very short, doesn't really represent. Over 1,200 Israelis died. The vast majority of those are civilians. They were just people. Almost 5,000 were injured. 243 were kidnapped, taken hostage, back by Hamas into Gaza Strip. I'll tell you what you really don't want is to be a captive of those people. And they committed unspeakable atrocities. I will not stay here because we need to move on, but it was a terrible thing. Okay. Israel said, now we're going to war. For 17 years, we've said we don't want to do, but we don't have a choice. These people cannot remain in power. We have to take Hamas down. But we're going to lose a lot of men. Yeah, we are. But it's going to be heavy civilian loss. Yes, it will be. But we don't have a choice. We cannot let these people, these animals, remain in charge there. We must. We are compelled to take them down. And so Israel went into the Gaza Strip. You're seeing pictures of vast desolation because Hamas has built their military structure into the civilian stuff, because the whole area is riddled with tunnels, and Israel's having to collapse all those tunnels, which then collapses the buildings that are built on top of the tunnels. Okay? The fighting has been brutal. Many thousands of terrorists have died. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers have died. Many civilians have died. Now, you've been hearing on the news, there have been 20,000, there have been 25,000, there have been 30,000, there's 35,000 civilians dead. That's horrible. It's not true, but it would be horrible if it were true. The people who are giving us the numbers of how many innocent civilians that Israel has wantonly murdered is the Gaza Health Agency, which is Hamas. And they're lying as much as they can. By the way, you're seeing horrible images. Much of this is specifically performed and produced. Okay? A lot of it's fake. Now, are Palestinian civilians suffering? Yes. And it really is a tragedy. Why are they suffering? Because they're being used as human shields by Hamas. But don't we need a ceasefire? Israel's offered a ceasefire over and over and over, and Hamas rejects the ceasefires. Okay? Hamas doesn't want a ceasefire. They're unwilling to go with a ceasefire. Okay? But there's terrible atrocities and war crimes going on. There's genocide going on. You're right, there is. There are war crimes and there is genocide going on. You say, is Israel's guilty? No. The war crimes, the genocide, the atrocities are being done by Hamas. Hamas has the list of war crimes that they are committing by what they are doing is as long as my arm. The genocide against Israel is absolutely, they're very open about it. Okay, the atrocities are cataloged and they're atrocious. Are Israel's hands completely clean? No, they're not. You need to understand, Israel, they're not Christian people, they are Jewish people, and I'm pro-Israel, but they're mostly lost, okay? They are, I'm very confident, the most moral army in the world that does the best job of any army in the world of protecting civilian casualties. But they're in an impossible situation. Hamas specifically has organized it so there's no way that they can do the job without harming civilians. And so Israel's like, we either go in, and many civilians are going to be hurt. Not nearly the numbers they're given, but many will be. Or we let another October 7th happen. And so that is the choice that they've got before them. It's a horrible thing, okay? As a part of this war, the war gets wider. On April 1st, now that we're talking this month, okay, 3 weeks ago, Israel attacks, you hear that Israel attacked an Iranian embassy. Well, no. Israel did attack a building in Damascus. Well, isn't Damascus in Syria? Yes, it is. But do you remember that Syria is much controlled by Iran right now? And they have their terrorist groups in Iran that are being led by Iranian generals. And what they attacked is there was the Iranian embassy, which, by the way, didn't get a scratch. And next door to it, there was a building that they called the consulate. But it wasn't actually a consulate. What it actually was the military headquarters for the generals that were coordinating with the terrorist groups. And the general that was there that day, that was targeted, is the one who organized Hamas to do the October 7th massacres. That guy and his staff were in that building in Damascus that day, and Israel found out about it, and they said, he is going down. And so they attacked very specifically the building that he was in, blew it up, killed him, another general, and 5 other Iranian officers. They richly deserved what they got. And Israel did it with such precision that the embassy next door was not scratched. But Iran, nonetheless, takes offense at this and says, well, this is completely unacceptable. We can't have Israel going around doing that. And Iran vows massive attack in response. And so we've been waiting for that, and that happened last Saturday. Well, we've covered all the way from 1948 to last Saturday. And so last Saturday, Israel does a massive attack against Israel. And I'm out of time, so I've got to go really quick. They attacked Iranian missiles came in from Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, and Yemen, okay? They sent against them 110 ballistic, it was actually 120 ballistic missiles, hang on, 170 drones, 30 plus cruise missiles, 120 plus ballistic missiles. It was the largest missile strike in the history of the world. Israel has an excellent air defense. The whole concept is we will send 330 things to all descend on Israel at one moment, overwhelm their air defenses, and blow Israel to pieces. It was a very serious, a very deadly attack. Against it, there's a list of all the things that Israel shut down. Israel's military went up to defend its air defenses, its air force. They went up. U.S., Britain, and France helped out. Amazingly, the Arab countries of Jordan and Saudi Arabia also helped Israel because they are in the MEAD, the Middle East Air Defense Group that stands against Iran. And so you had Jordanians and Iranians and Saudis also knocking down Iranian equipment that was coming in. So it was this massive attack. It was honestly terrifying. The chances of Israel experiencing terrible slaughters, losing thousands or tens of thousands, was very real. And by the grace of God, there was virtually no damage whatsoever. Almost everything was shut down. There was one little Bedouin girl out in the desert who was hit and seriously injured by falling shrapnel. That was the only injury that we know of. There were some air bases that took some hits, but they weren't serious. They all were able to continue operating. And so Iran says, we are going to wreak vengeance. We are going to send this mighty strike. We are going to level Israel. And they shot off 330 different projectiles, rockets, missiles, and cruise missiles. And they accomplished absolutely nothing. That's amazing. It's like Six-Day War amazing. It's like crossing of the Red Sea amazing. You say, how is that? Well, first of all, very much give props to the Israeli military, to the U.S., British, French, to the Jordanian and Saudi. They did great work. But if all you do is praise the militaries and you don't see the hand of God here, you're blind. This is about God. God protected his people. You say, well, you knew he was going to do that. He doesn't. Sometimes he allows Israel to be judged by the other nations. This time he chose to protect them.